I started from zero. I mean, from occupational therapy, I didn't know anything about a sales process. And so, knowing how to catch that person's attention, get them to raise their hand, and then say the right things to get them in the door, and then, be able to price present, handle any objections, how to key them as a customer, how to upsell, those are all things that you don't know. And so on a tactical basis, developing a sales process within your company or within your own business.
From wiping, well, let's just say helping people in compromising situations, to building a thriving wellness business, Delfin Ward's journey is full of surprises. In this episode of the Health Business Builder Show, we'll uncover the secrets to his unconventional path to success. We'll explore how he transitioned from occupational therapist to entrepreneurship, the creative marketing strategies that fueled his growth, and his unique approach to leadership and personal development. Hopefully this episode has a healthy dose of motivation. Let's get started. Delfin Ward, welcome to the show. How you doing, brother?
I am well, thank you. I was walking by, so I thought I'd stop in.
Stop in and do a podcast here.
Yeah. No, seriously, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Been trying to connect.
It's cool to have our paths clash in terms of two OTs that find ourselves being business owners, which I feel like is rare in our industry. Is like even somebody who does marketing for the healthcare industry, it's so rare for me to actually talk to other occupational therapists that have decided to start their practice. Like more often than not, for whatever reason, it's often like chiropractors or physical therapists, even doctors start private practices because there's a lot more DPC going on these days. You've taken a unique route with a health and wellness center, which we'll get into. But before we do, as an OT, I'd like to start with, you have a story as to kind of an aha moment that made you realize you wanted to start entrepreneurship.
Yes. And so I don't know, I mean, for the listeners, I don't know if you heard of skilled nursing, but it's another word for a nursing home. And towards the end of my career, I've worked in a lot of different OT jobs. But towards the end, when we moved back to Texas, the one that offered me the most flexibility and better pay and just more control of my schedule was skilled nursing. And it's not the most glamorous job as an occupational therapist. For the most part, you're an eval machine, you're a documentation machine. And then when you do get to do treatments, especially in that demographic or that population, sometimes it involves toileting and, we call ADLs, activities of daily living. So these might be words you haven't heard in the law, Corey.
Honestly, when you were talking about some of that stuff, I was like, what? I forgot about so many of these things.
Yes. So in this case, I was practicing toilet transfers. And so I'll paint the picture. So, you're in the patient's room, say it's just your grandpa, and your grandpa is in the nursing home. He wants to go home. That's his goal. And one of the things you have to kind of prove or test out is, can you do a toilet transfer from your wheelchair to the toilet? And I mean, this is not the first time, but many times, but this is the last time, so he's doing the transfer. He had a bowel movement, and instead of, putting him back in his chair and just calling the nurse aide to kind of change him, I worked with him on that, right? Because I wouldn't want my grandpa or your grandpa sitting in his own filth. But there I am. He's standing up, he's holding on to the grab bars, and I'm gloved up, and there I am on my knees, just kind of wiping poop off the old man's balls. Let's just say that. And I remember just being there like, I'm in my late 30s, like there's got to be more to life than just working in a nursing home, cleaning poop off of people, And so I felt like I was just a glorified butt wiper. And, I didn't do that all the time, but again, that was like I got to change. And so that was kind of the catalyst to like, okay, what can I do? What can I do to change my situation? Because believe it or not, I had that same thought probably 5 years before, right? And then time goes by like that. I'm like, crap, I didn't do anything. I'm still here in a nursing home. So, that was just a teaching moment for me, like, start sooner, perhaps.
But why business then? Why not just like a different industry or even a different, like you could have worked in mental health, or you could have worked in pediatrics, or you could have worked in hands, but why entrepreneurship?
I've worked in all those settings. And for the most part, you could be a solopreneur. So my wife started Primo Rehab, which let's just call it outpatient, and it's cash pay. And you get to the point where she got to the point where she became like the guru status. And so patients only wanted to see her. We tried to hire other PTs. They didn't want to see her. Those other PTs, I'd worked there. They didn't want to see me. They wanted to see the guru. And then so from there, so I basically was working part-time or PRN. So that's just a way of like being a substitute occupational therapist. And so that allowed me to kind of bounce around, get that freedom again. And, but it wasn't scratching the itch. And I started doing some consulting for a lymphedema clinic. It was a startup. And that was another kind of step in the right direction of seeing how they started their business, seeing the two founders that basically had no experience in healthcare, but they saw lymphedema and having a lymphedema outpatient center as a way to make money. And I was one of their ICs and helping them get started. So that was, I tried lots of things before we started Generator, which is a whole nother beast, because that's a brick and mortar business. That's that's a membership model and pack model in terms of revenue. We have a whole team of people. So it's, I went from being employed to I call it a big boy business.
So, I'm curious then, was there any sort of like entrepreneurship in your family, or where did some of the earlier seeds, where were they planted, right? Is because like, it seems like you worked in multiple settings, you tried a bunch of different things. Was it just like, this was the ultimate conclusion of, I tried what felt like every setting, and I feel like maybe the only thing I haven't tried is doing it for myself? Like where did this start, and how did you eventually lead to that?
Entrepreneurship or running a business, it's not in our DNA, at least in my family. I mean, my mom was a nurse, and she would tell me, go to college, become a nurse, or get in healthcare, work your 20 years, and then retire. I mean, and I understood that generation could do that, but there's not too many companies out there that offer those type of retirement benefits. And then, on my dad's side, my grandpa would have cafes, and I mean, I guess you can call that running a business, but it wasn't like, it seemed like my grandpa was always chasing or he was looking for the next pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like it never really stuck, but I think it really started when I met my wife, Jessica. Her father was an independent contractor as a painter, but he did a lot of things. He became a general contractor and built houses. And then, Jessica was always kind of she's a figure it out and let's do it. She's like a founder in her DNA. And so all the good stuff in my life is mostly because of my wife, I would say, in my adult life at least.
I'm sure she's going to appreciate hearing you say that.
Well, I'll make that an audio clip and send it to her.
The reason I asked that question is because even just reflecting on myself, it was never even dawned on me that it was an option, right? Now, if you ask me, I think it's the only option in terms of ownership. Is like when you look at people who have created their wealth, assuming that's your goal, or even if you want to just grow as a person and to learn new skills and to be able to have an impact on the world, I would argue it really, so much of it is rooted in ownership, right? And maybe not even full ownership. I don't think there's anything wrong with like in your situation, having a partner or being a number two of somebody else that maybe has a vision. Maybe you just like doing the grind, but having some stake in it, right? Whether it's equity or partnership or whatever the case might be. I just see it all happening in ownership. But the reason I bring that up is like, again, reflecting on myself, I didn't even know that was an option. Like optionality for me, when I think of all the way up through my mid-20s probably, was like, you just work a job. That's how you make money. And if you have the right job or you work enough hours, you become rich and wealthy and somehow financially free.
Right.
I just don't think that's true anymore, to be honest. And so that's why I'm just curious as to like, what were some of those stepping stones for you, like getting there? And it seems like there was a number of things that eventually led you to starting Generator Lab. Right.
Well, when you think about it, it's not like we wanted to start another cash pay business. We didn't want to start a home health therapy business. I mean, if you look at that model, the payer source is typically Medicare or some kind of private insurance, and reimbursement could take a long time, or they pay you diddly squat. And so we wanted to do something different. And so we kind of went to boutique wellness. And so that was the route we chose. And I'm glad we did.
Any regrets?
Let's see.
Any
regrets with the business model?
Yeah, of choosing that route. And the only reason I say that is because maybe this was maybe 2 episodes ago. I had Jared Carter. Do you know Jared Carter?
Yeah. He's like a guru in the cash pay industry.
Totally. Brilliant. Awesome conversation. But we just got into kind of your point about not wanting to deal with insurance anymore and taking a cash-based route to it. And I think that can create a pretty sustainable business. But you do have to be like dedicated to cash pay and being like insurance, like we just don't do it. That's why I ask if there's any regrets behind going this model.
No, I would say there's no regrets, because the old model is I'm exchanging time for money. And in this model, it's a team sport. So I have a team of people that we've curated that is making the business money, and same thing with the equipment. A funny story, when I used to work at a country club, and I remember, I would kind of study how people made their money. And there was one guy in particular, I really liked his business model because he had a print shop and his equipment made him money. It wasn't his time, it wasn't his skills, or, he wasn't, providing therapy or coaching a session. It was his equipment. And so if you look at our model, we do have equipment in there, and we do have employees that are making the company money. We pay them money, but there's a difference there that go towards the top line and bottom line.
There's a great quote by Warren Buffett, and I might butcher it, but it's something along the lines is like, until you learn how to make money while you sleep, you'll work forever.
Yes. Yeah. It's holiday season now, so we're getting more gift card sales. But I remember that we opened up September 2018, and then December came around and someone bought our first gift card. I'm like, it was just an awe moment for me to think that someone enjoyed our business so much. They bought someone else a gift card. So yeah, it was an online sale. It wasn't like we had to do, a sales pitch or anything. They just bought it. And so that was a cool feeling.
As a previous healthcare professional now in the health and wellness industry with Generator Lab, what were some of the lessons that you learned and maybe you carried over from the healthcare industry that you still now use today?
One is, people, how to talk and interact with people. Earlier, I said I was an an evaluation machine. And so in the business world, that's a client intake. That's a tour, where you're learning about why that person's inside your business or why they're interested. So, doing all those evaluations, knocking on a patient's door in a hospital room, selling them on the fact like, hey, you got to get out of bed, let's go to therapy. Or, hey, my name is Delfin. What is occupational therapy? I had to explain my services, what I did, convince them to get out of bed because they're in pain. And so getting those reps in and being uncomfortable at first, but the more reps I did, you could, bang out 12 evals in a day. And so the same thing goes with sales. If you have a sales process at your business and you are doing, say, following up with leads, you have to get on the phone or text. I know our younger generation of employees like to text, but there's nothing wrong with getting on the phone, having a prepared script, and that's customized towards you, and calling and taking that client from the lead process to a customer process.
Do you think that the uniqueness of being a healthcare professional has carried over to your skills as a business owner? Do you think what I'm getting at is, do you think there's overlap there? And sometimes I wonder this for myself as well, is like, I agree. I think there was definitely some people skills. There's no question, especially as an OT, there was a ton of people skills that I developed, but sometimes I think they're different, right? Is like, for me as a previous healthcare professional in OT, so much of my people skills were just like dealing with incredibly difficult or challenging or heinous people that I didn't really want to spend time with,
right? Which
has its value in business. But at the same time too, I now just avoid those people like the plague,
right?
And decide not to work with them. So just curious.
Yeah, it goes back to, it was health care. And so what I mean by that is you have to care. And so when we started hiring, when we redid our core values, and our core values spells out, the acronym spells out cares or carers. You want your employees to care, right? And, people come to us because they want to get better, or they want to lose weight, or they're in pain, or they're on this health journey, but you have to hire people that care. And in the early days when we didn't really have that kind of frame of reference of how to hire people or what to look for, we let in some bad folks into the company and they may not care. So something as basic as hiring carers. So again, going back to healthcare, just you're into healthcare to care for people. And so now that I'm in the private sector, I guess I call it the boutique space, I want carers. So
I've heard you talk about how to vet when you're hiring in terms of like figuring out somebody's strengths and weaknesses. And you were talking about how a question you can ask somebody is like in your career, your profession, like what do you love doing? And this can often point into what somebody's strengths and strengths are. And then on the weakness side of it is like, what tasks would you delegate? If I was to ask you that same question, what would be the answer for you? What are the things that you absolutely love to do as a business owner? And what are the things that you just completely delegate and make sure to get off your plate?
Well, I'll start with the delegate part because, that's the stuff that's, sucks the energy out of an owner or a founder. And this is where we still are, and that's okay. But say payroll, I still operate payroll that kind of sucks some of my time and energy, but I like seeing the numbers. I like to see, especially when it comes to paying out commission, I like to see who's the sales tiger on our sales team. So there's some pros and cons to it, but it does suck my energy. HR stuff, I still wear a lot of hats in the business. So anything that's HR, it requires some of my time, and it doesn't give me energy. So anything that doesn't give me energy, I'd like to delegate, but it's still a business and I still have to do what it takes to get shit done.
Totally. What about the other side? What's your strength?
Strengths, I like the creative process. I like, that gives me energy. I like interacting and growing my team. Essentially, I work for my team these days. Like, I don't necessarily have a boss, but I work for my staff. My job, I think I like servitude leadership. So anything I can do, or any kind of skill, or if they need a staple or whatever, anything that makes their job easier, that's what I do. So I enjoy and I like serving my team. I like meeting new entrepreneurs. I like the growing, the personal and professional development growth out of running a business. What
does creativity look like for you as a business owner of a health and wellness business like yours? And just give people context.
Yeah.
Maybe explain what you guys do ultimately, and then go ahead and share what creativity looks like.
Yeah. So we have Generator Athlete Lab. My wife and I started that. We opened up in 2018. And so that's a boutique wellness and fitness studio in downtown Austin, Texas. We have 3 big pillars. We have personal training. We have clinical-based massage therapy, and then we have our wellness protocol, which is perhaps what we're most known for. And that starts off with infrared saunas, and then you transition to a wet room where we have medical-grade, FDA-approved cold tubs and hot tubs. And then you transition into like a compression lounge where you can experience, graduated compression therapy like Normatec. We have red light therapy. We have vibration therapy. So that's what we're known for. And then for the business owners, it's a membership and pack model. And so that's how we get our revenue.
And what does creativity look like for you guys? Because like I've definitely seen you do some creative things. Like I remember, I think there was like some sort of race. I don't know if it was like the Austin Marathon or something, but like you were putting up signs or something.
Yes, I get a lot of my creativity from innovating from other industries, and so I'll see some kind of guerrilla marketing, and then I'll just put my twist to it. One thing I did recently was in our shopping center, to call it that, they don't allow A-frame signs. And so one way I got around that but they do have plenty of bike racks. So I took a bike, I made signs, attached it to the bike, and then I parked the bike in the main plaza area so that when people are walking to True Foods or Trader Joe's or getting their coffee, they see the sign, and it happens to be, I don't know if you remember the movie Dazed and Confused, but it's Wooderson, Matthew McConaughey's iconic character, but it was something about, you'd be a lot cooler if you did, if you visited Generator. So that's what kind of fun I have. So, and those are the things that I will bypass our marketing team or our marketing folks, because it's just like a personal creative outlet for me. You know?
What are some of the other more creative things you've done for your marketing then? Like I mentioned, the other one was the sign putting up. I think it was. I swear to God, it was like some sort of race around Austin. But
so that was I had those signs made. So I took that from the real estate world, and I have my real estate license, and so I pay attention to how other industries market, and so I notice if a realtor has just one sign and you drive past it, you really don't pay attention. But when they have 5, 6 signs in a row, it really catches your eye. And so I would put these signs on the race course, whether it's for the Austin Triathlon or a marathon, and it's on the race course. I take my kids, we go the night before, and we're staking these signs out on, in this case, Cesar Chavez, because that's, the home stretch. And so the runners see it, and there's a call to action, like, hey, bring your race bib into the store and you get a discount on one of our day passes. And so that's one creative way of, innovating from something I saw in the real estate world and putting it in our health and wellness business.
I need more of your creative ideas like this.
Yeah.
These are great. I'm not going to say his name because I don't think he deserves it, but there's a real estate agent back in Minnesota when I was still living there like 4 years ago. And every billboard, I kid you not, you could not drive anywhere within the Twin Cities area within 100 miles and not see a billboard of this real estate agent. And it was literally just him with like his face and his arms as wide as the billboard, and it said his name across it.
Right.
And then there was always like some slogan attached to it. You would see him on billboards, you'd see him on the side of buses, you would see him everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere. He had to have been spending millions of dollars just to like get his face across the entire Twin Cities area. And then my girlfriend and I were just back in Minnesota for I think maybe 2-3 months ago. And I couldn't believe it. When I got there, this was like, it's been like 4 years now where he's had his signs across all of the Twin Cities area. And I was like, okay, I don't know what he's spending, but it's obviously working and it's obviously worth the money for him, because if he continues to do it, it's often whatever he's making to sell homes is paying off whatever he's having to pay to keep all these billboards around.
Right.
But it was like the most in your face marketing I've seen in a long time, almost like Bucky's degree.
Yeah.
But like it's working.
It is. I don't know if you've heard of Roy H. Williams. He's an old school marketer, and he handles huge accounts. He's actually based out of Austin. So I think he has like a nickname like the marketing wizard or the wizard of marketing. And he has his own like marketing school. But I saw him speak at a conference, and he talked about the billboard play. And he would do it for, like, say, HVAC companies. And I mean, these HVAC companies, once they do, like, say if they do an M&A play, like a mergers and acquisitions, I mean, they can sell for several hundred millions of dollars. But he would do this play where basically what the billboard and maybe TV commercials did was, you're not competing on HVAC near me, because you spend your time on your brand. And then that way, when someone Googles, like, I don't know the name of that realtor, but maybe they Google him, and his ad spend is on his name and not realtor near me. And so it's a smart play.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
100%. As a little tangential detour here, I hope you're okay with this.
Yeah.
I hope the audience is as well. But I've more or less become pretty obsessed with just, you could call them boring businesses. I just love this idea of buying a boring and ugly business and then injecting some sort of like modern branding or marketing behind it and watching it excel. Like your HVAC example is what made me think of it, is like I could guarantee you, anyone listening to this, that in your local area, there's probably a handful of like plumbers, electrician, HVAC, whatever, name your boring business, that's probably been around for a long while, and they probably have a pretty good service. They probably have really skilled people that are working there, but they have trash and old and outdated marketing and branding, and no one's ever come in to update it. And you could literally step in and just funnel leads to that business and crush, in my opinion. And I think there's so many opportunities for that right now, because it's just, nobody cares about it. It's not sexy.
You're absolutely right. I belong to an organization called Entrepreneurship Organization, and there are several EO members there that's what they do. Those not sexy business, everywhere from, renting porta-johns to plumbers to HVAC. I mean, and they just systemize it, because, it sees that older generation that did not really lean into the technology or a CRM or anything like that, or upsells, or just how to proper call centers and how to answer the phone. They implement those processes and scale the business.
I've become so much less intrigued with startups. Like I recently, and this is no shame to them or anybody who has a startup or is doing a startup, but I just recently went to a networking event that was a whole bunch of startups and investors or whatever. And it's fine. And I get why everybody's attracted to it, because it's like sexy, because we have this new AI technology company or this new social media company or whatever, name your thing. And I get why everybody gets appealed to it and it looks super sexy. But when you dig into like the numbers and like who's actually winning, kind of back to our previous conversation, even before the show, about ownership, is like, it's that, right? It's the porta potties, it's the ditch diggers, it's the street sweepers. It's my girlfriend sent me one the other day. It's a guy up in, I think, Waco, and he repaints parking lines, like just parking lots that have the white and yellow lines. He just gets paid to redo that. And I'm like, not sexy, probably crushing it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because when I get to see how other people run their business, and if their labor cost is so low, I mean, it gets tempting. When, say, I've been talking to an investor who's wanting me to come on board, but it's basically those unmanned gyms, like an Anytime Fitness or whatever the case may be. But I mean, in my model, my labor cost is one of the biggest line items on my expense. So, again, I have great teams, but when I look at other business models, I'm like, okay, this will help increase the profit margin.
Thanks for doing that detour, and I appreciate everybody else coming along for that
Yeah.
ride.
No. I mean, I like to nerd out on businesses, and so I imagine. I mean, I nerd out on this podcast, so I imagine there are other, say, healthcare providers that are looking for other options, and they don't have to be in healthcare.
Totally. And even if like you didn't want to necessarily like buy another business because that feels overwhelming, I think that's the first thing that comes to most people's minds, is like there are also ways to like have tangential benefits. So say, for example, there's somebody else in your local area that has a similar business, but maybe they're really struggling and they need more patients or they need more leads or whatever. Is like there's ways where you could negotiate a deal where if you provide them additional customers, you can take a cut of that, right? Take your business, for example, is somebody who provides more or less like wellness and recovery and massage and those sorts of things. You could very easily, I'm sure, partner with like, let's say a chiropractor or a physical therapist, and like referring and getting a cut of that referral is another way just to have additional income into the business. But
yeah, going back to marketing, you need several lines in the water. So B2B marketing is one of the lines that we actively, implement every month.
Totally. So back to Generator Lab. So you said started in 2018. We are in now 2024, almost 2025, which is insane to me. What have you learned in that stint that you did see in the early days that are now doing differently today based on like trial error? Okay, we messed that up. Now we're doing this differently. What are some of the big lifting items that you changed?
I would say it comes down to leadership and people. Again, because I'm not in the studio day to day. And so hiring the right people and getting them to do the right things and be in the right seat. And then I think a lesson that sometimes I learn again is when I do allow someone and they're in our company and they're in the wrong seat, sometimes I lead by fear where like, oh, we're about to go out of country and we got to keep this person in while we're gone. In hindsight, I should have let that person go. Because the second and third effects of keeping that person in the company was not worth it in hindsight. So it goes back to people. Again, we started Generator not necessarily to create another job for us. I didn't want to work inside the business, which I still do. I have to pop in, but I want to work more on the business. So I would say it's just ongoing leadership training and on myself and with the team.
I heard something a while ago, and I think it's so true, is basically your degree of success is directly proportionate to the number of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. And I think that's a big part of what you're talking about, especially as somebody in a leadership position, which anyone who owns a business at the end of the day is. How do how do you manage that, right? Like, how do you deal with that? How do you find the right people? How do you have those difficult conversations in a respectable way? How do you fire people at the end of the day, I guess? Like, how do you figure that all out?
At first it was trial and error, figuring out how to hire people, fire people, keep good people. And then when I started, again, belonging and paying for coaching and joining masterminds, I was able to learn from other folks. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Some of the, if you want to call it a regret, I know I had to fire or terminate, let's just say a partnership with another company. And I did it in such a crappy way. And sometimes I still beat myself up about it, but I was like, I could have done that differently. And, flash forward a year, that conversation, that topic comes up at a course, like, oh, that's what I should have done. And so,
What did you do? Do you mind sharing?
yeah, so I'll talk high level about it. It was a let's call like a B2B relationship, and this group got X amount of memberships, but it wasn't working out. In hindsight, it wasn't our demographic. They were taking at that time like all the good spots, and there was no return. So one thing was that we didn't set clear enough expectations of like, hey, if you want this is what we expect in return. We didn't know to do that. Now when we do have like an influencer relationship, we have expectations, we have contracts, and we've seen those be very not lucrative, but it's a return. But in this case, it wasn't, and I wasn't having that daily or even weekly communication, like, hey, what's going on? So when I did bring down the axe, it came out of nowhere. And, these were other professional people that belonged to a professional team. And in hindsight, I was like, oh, I did not do that correctly. I just felt rushed making that decision, and I did not do it in the right way. So
It sounds like you delayed the uncomfortable conversation to the point where it was just way worse than it should have been.
Correct. So even now, when we have team members, what helps with that is if you have, if you own a company and you have these weekly or even biweekly or monthly check-ins, and you have these honest conversations, and you make it, you learn how to talk to people. You don't say, you're not doing this, because that sounds like an attack. It could be something as simple, again, when you're winning with words, like, hey, a sales associate at Generator is expected to do this. So there's another way of saying it. Or when you go back to the scorecard, like, hey, you're not doing A, B, and C. What's going on? Lead with, being curious, and then coach as you can. Or like when I had to let somebody go, sometimes I'll test a situation where I'll explain what's going on. And if they're coachable, they might say, what can I do? But if they start defending themselves, that tells me that it was a bad hire in the first place. They're not coachable and they don't want to get better.
How many strikes do you give somebody before you're like, okay, this isn't working anymore?
We let someone go after the first strike. Mm-hmm. Again, so a big theme of 2024 was just not settling and letting go of underperforming players. So once, in my model, the studio manager is in the org chart, at least they control the studio, and then we help the studio manager. And once we got that position filled again, we were able to reassess the team. And there are folks on there that were, say, B or C players, and they weren't doing revenue generating task. And they were just kind of a negative Nancy. And because I liked the person, I let them stay 2 years too long, and that was a tough conversation. But again, having those tough conversations allowed us to grow, and, Q4 is looking stronger because of that. So it was a tough decision, but also having the framework, having a coach that I hired, like, hey, here's 4 things you got to do when you have this conversation to frame it that way. You have a script to follow, and it's not like you're just kind of petering around trying to avoid, hey, you're fired or something.
This conversation is very relevant for me right now. I've heard this phrase a lot, and I've never really fully grasped it until I feel like within this past year, is that A players like to play with other A players. And I'm realizing that more and more as of lately, especially this year, I've been doing a lot more like equity deals with people, is where I'm not charging a fee, but I'm taking equity in the business because I know that I can really help grow it. And as I'm starting to work with more teams, I'm also realizing like there are certain teams that just don't have A players, and it's frustrating. And I'm not trying to brag or say like I'm this amazing human that everybody should hire. I'm not saying that at all. But there is definitely a noticeable difference in terms of like skill levels when you work with certain people. And so like I said, that phrase is just becoming more and more true with me, is like A players like to work with other A players. And if you don't, as the owner, like you're talking about, which I feel like is what you're talking about, is like if you don't kind of cut ties with those people early on, it actually has kind of like a, I don't know a better word than like disease effect that kind of just like infiltrates other arts areas of the business that you wouldn't want to otherwise, unfortunately, as sad as that sounds. But yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. You have a couple acronyms, FIO and GSD.
Yes. So FIO is figure it out. So I think that's a good mindset to have when you're running a business, because you're not going to know everything. I used to think that, I used to say this word, I don't say it anymore, but I would identify with it, but imposter syndrome. Those are just one of those buzzy words that went around, I think, in the self-help space. But for me, it's just like, hey, I'm not going to know everything. And as a business owner, every day, I'm going to have to figure something out. But now I have resources or tools or people to connect with to figure it out. And then GSD is, I'm not going to say the S word again, because if my kids are listening, I have to buy them Starbucks. But someone say, get stuff done. And
You buy them Starbucks if you swear?
yes.
Why Starbucks of all things?
They like those fruity drinks. So
Classic.
yeah,
How old are they?
8,
8?
11. Yeah, 8, 11,
Your
and 14.
8-year-olds like Starbucks?
Well, she gets the cake pops. So it's like a little cake pop. And then my Giovanna, the one that's the baker, she likes all these fancy drinks, and she makes drinks at home. So I want her in the business in the future, because there's eventually we want to do other things. And so whether it's developing scents or developing an easy make beverage that we could sell, I want her involved.
You're already thinking about your kids in the business. I like that.
Yes.
Let's hope they feel the same way.
Well, yeah, I hope so too. If they want to be on payroll.
Yeah. It is something I think about, honestly, more than I ever used to before. Kind of back to our conversation about like boring businesses, is like one of the reasons that's another reason there's opportunities there, is because most kids, I mean, if you're 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever, 20 years old, you probably don't want to own like a painting business, right? Like you want to be a creator, or you want to be a YouTuber, or you want to do some sort of sexy digital business, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But that just means opportunities for people that see that these are great cash flowing businesses. It's
that maturity level. I mean, that same boring business probably would not have resonated with me in my 20s.
No.
And so it takes, if I can get my kids there faster and understand that faster, that'd be a win.
I got another one for you. Checkup from the neck up. Tell me more.
Yes. So I consume a lot of self-help, or not, I hate saying self-help, personal or professional development. So an old school guy in the space is Zig Ziglar, also like Jim Rohn. I always go back to those guys when I need a checkup from the neck up. But they just have some good wisdom to share. And so with Zig saying you need a checkup from the neck up, because that'll basically lead to stinking thinking, and then eventually hardening of your attitude. And, for me, so there's some daily practices or even weekly practices that I need to do in order to kind of get my head in the right space. Because running a business is harder than you like it to be. And so whether it's, working out or sleeping right, eating well, cold plunge, sauna, those things like that helps with my, with my energy, not to sound too woo-woo, but my vibrations. And, it's those little things that help, because otherwise it'll lead to stinking thinking.
What's the top 3 for you? Like if you had to distill down the top 3 things that give you that biggest rejuvenation feeling, I guess, that you're hitting on, what do you think it is for you?
It's the basics, sleep, eat, and moving my body.
Basic.
Yeah. Nothing. If I've had a crappy night's sleep, I don't feel like working out, or I'm groggy in the morning, and there's a cumulative effect to that. And so you could do that for a while, but it'll start falling apart. So nothing sexy there.
I'm disgustingly annoying about my sleep. I protect it so much that it's annoying at times. Like an example of this was my girlfriend just flew out to Louisville this last weekend to go visit some friends, and her flight was at 5 a.m. And I was like, I'm not getting up to drive you. Like, I'm not doing it. Like,
No. Seriously.
I was straight up. I was like, I'll pay for the Uber. I'm not getting up that early. Like, I just value my sleep that much.
Right.
Like, it's not worth it for me. But maybe a little extreme. But.
Yeah. No. On the same thread, I will, especially if it's going to be over 2 nights, I have cut out a memory foam mattress topper that I will roll up and then saran wrap so it compacts kind of nice. And then I will put that on the hotel bed because most hotel mattresses suck. And so I will travel with my own mattress topper so I can sleep well.
That works.
Yeah, it works. And it'll fit. I mean, it's basically the shape of my body because I'm a back sleeper, and so it prevents a lot of that tossing and turning in the middle of the night.
I've never done that. 3 things I always travel with though: an eye mask, earplugs, and mouth tape. I just use like a medical paper tape,
Right, yeah.
to keep my mouth closed. Those 3 things, I always travel with those.
And so tell me why, because I'll dabble with the mouth tape. So why do you do it? What's it?
Just helps with nose breathing.
Nose
at the end of the
breathing?
day. Yeah. You sleep better when you breathe through your nose.
Right. And then I figured every once in a while I will snore, or I'll wake myself up. So I'm wondering if I'm snoring and if the mouth tape helps.
It does help. I can definitely definitively tell you though, you can for sure still snore through mouth tape.
Yeah.
My girlfriend has told me many times. I didn't think I snored. And then I didn't believe her so much that she actually recorded it and had to play it back for me. And like, this was you last night. And I was like, oh, I do snore.
But are you breathing? Like that's the thing. I get paranoid. Like if I have the mouth tape, is it going to affect my quality of sleep? Because if I'm snoring, I'm struggling for air. And so I don't know. I go back and forth on testing it out.
But you always breathe better through your nose though.
Correct.
So like, even if you were struggling for air, continuing to breathe through your nose, you're going to get more oxygen anyways. I don't know. I get what you're saying though. The first time I ever used mouth tape, there was a few nights, I guess you could say, where like I kind of like became short of breath and like woke up.
Right.
But then you kind of get used to it. I don't know.
I'm gonna have to listen to that recording one day.
Yeah. Do you snore?
We can have my wife record mine and we can compare.
Can we tap into some of you mentioned personal development, education, just like how important it's been to invest in those things. What are some of like the biggest bang for your bucks that you've done? I know you've mentioned mastermind, but like, can we get a little bit more like lessons learned, tactical, like things that you've applied, whether it's like books or courses or certain skills you've developed? What are some of the most impactful things?
Paying someone that's done it before, so that way you can get, it's a big time collapse, so it could be like, okay, here's how you need to do your pricing structure, or here's why, then that way you can kind of innovate and do your own, here's how you set up your billing. Do you have a sales process? Like, no, because I started from zero. From occupational therapy, I didn't know anything about a sales process. And so, knowing how to catch that person's attention, get them to raise their hand, and then say the right things to get them in the door, and then be able to price present, handle any objections, how to key them as a customer, how to upsell. Those are all things that you don't know. And so on a tactical basis, developing a sales process within your company or within your own business on yourself was something that it sounds basic to probably an expert, but I've never done it before. So that was one thing. Hiring, setting up a way to find good talent, how to ask good interview questions. And
how do you find good talent?
I will say this. I feel lucky that I'm in the health and wellness space because it attracts people. That's their interest, right? So I don't, no knock on Subway, but it's not like I'm dealing with GEDs, and that employee pool. So I am getting good talent. I'm getting students from UT that are in kinesiology, or I'm getting somebody that's on their own wellness journey and they resonate with what we offer. So I do feel like that's been a blessing in being in the health and wellness space. Being able to have a coach where, you're going through a tough situation and they could tell you, hey, what you're going through is normal. I've been there before, because it's almost like they're your therapist as well.
Do you have a way of figuring out who those best mentors or coaches are? I got to imagine you probably trialed and error in a few. So and the reason I ask that question is I can just hear somebody listening to this episode and thinking to themselves like, okay, I get it. I've heard it. I should hire a coach or a mentor or find somebody but how do you do that? Right? Like what's the basic answer of figuring that out? Cause you could find anybody technically.
Yeah. It's like dating, try, somebody may be able to say the same content, who was, I can't remember who wrote I Will Always Love You. Maybe it was Dolly Parton, but then Whitney Houston sang it, right? So it's the same song, but it resonates with people differently. So someone could talk about the same business principles, but the way they tell their stories, it might resonate more with you. So it's like dating. And then, a great way, especially some coaches in the business space, if they're on a podcast, if they host a podcast or they're being interviewed, that's a great way of interviewing them. If they're providing edu content, that's a great way to get someone to know, like, and trust you. And I think that's a great strategy that you offer in your podcast. It gets people to know, like, and trust you. They feel like they know Corey before they even pick up the phone or hire you.
I think people vastly underestimate that content creates warm connections. I don't even want to say the word leads. It creates warm connections. Mm-hmm. And a perfect example of this literally happened to me today. There was a guy on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, if anybody doesn't know. And there was a guy that reached out to make a connection with me. And on first blush, I didn't really have any interest in connecting with him, to be honest. And then he had a YouTube channel and he had some content on there. And I checked out a couple of videos. And very quickly, I felt my psychology change to the point where I was like, oh, I feel a little bit connected to this guy. I feel like I know him. He seems friendly and relatable. He's got this British accent, oh, wow, which makes it even more friendly.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. It was just a reminder for me of just how powerful content is even if there are so few people that rather see the content that you create, or you don't have a lot of followers, or it's not going trending, whatever, it doesn't matter. Even when somebody finds you, whether they're looking to hire or they're looking for somebody to work with, or you're looking for a job, is having content, assuming you're not doing weird stuff, assuming you're not being scammy or shady, right, or showing your toes or something stupid, yeah, right? Assuming you're just being a normal human,
right?
People vastly underestimate how much that just warms up relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you guys find content a part of your strategy? I know a huge part of you is guerrilla marketing, grassroots, making relationships. What about the content side of things at Generator Lab?
Yeah, organic marketing, which is probably what you're referring to, is a big part of our business. So, our lens, there are a lot of companies that offer the same modalities that we do, but our lens is, our healthcare background. So we say things in more of an evidence-based way when we talk about our stuff. And so we do that. We also want to highlight the experience. For me, the experience is the kind of one of the big differentiators in our business. And allows us to kind of attract the people that we want to attract. And so you can convey that in your social media. And then the next thing I'm wanting to implement, I'm getting ready to, is with our organic marketing, let's just say Instagram. I'm getting ready, and I learned this from another business owner. So when you get a new follower, that's a trigger for you to send, let's just call it a DM. That could be a script, right? And then you start a conversation, and then you can quickly find out, qualify that person as a lead if they live in the area, or they're just snooping, or if they're, and that could lead to more questions like, hey, are you interested in massage? Are you interested in personal training? What are you interested in? And then you can get that person eventually on the phone and into your door. And so that's one way you can use organic social marketing or social media in your business.
Most people probably don't realize I do this, and it sounds like you do this as well. But yeah, when somebody follows you, I almost always send them a message. Something along the lines of hey, thanks for the follow, or how did you find me, or something just very basic. Mm-hmm. Very few people actually do that. I don't know if you realize that, but
I did not know that, because look at it. You're spending all that time creating content, and if you're wasting that time and effort for creating all that content, you're not doing it for your ego. There's a purpose or a reason why you should do it. I mean, you got to turn those followers into dollars, whatever,
That's the most dad joke, I think.
Yes, yes. I got tons of dad jokes. So
keep them coming.
Yeah.
Those are great. The other thing too that I think you guys have done a good job of, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but I actually literally just wrote a post about this today, is the people like to look at the large influencers, the large followings, the people with millions of followers or even hundreds of thousands of followers. And they assume that partnering with them will then in turn lead to customers or leads. And it actually rarely does in most of the conversations that I've had with people. And the reason is kind of like what I wrote that post about today is, and I didn't come up with this idea, but the death of the follower is that it's actually really not that important to have a large following anymore. And this is good and bad news, depending upon where you're sitting. If you have a large following, sorry, it doesn't matter as much anymore. But if you don't, it's great news, because really what the algorithms are rewarding now is relevant and interesting content based on your previous likes in browser history and the things you're already looking at. And so the best partnerships are actually what would be called micro influencers, or people with just small followings, which could literally be hundreds, maybe 1,000, maybe a couple thousand followers, but they have your ideal demographic and your ideal customer. Those are the people that are always best to partner and collaborate with, versus just like trying to find the massive influencer and assuming somehow this one person is going to solve all your leads problems. I don't know if you guys have done that intentionally, but I do know I've seen you guys do that.
Yes, we do that. And to kind of pull back the lens and highlight someone that's done that. And then that's the playbook we follow. I don't know if you ever heard of Joe Rogan or Aubrey Marcus. And so, Aubrey Marcus, before he partnered with Joe Rogan, had on it, right? And then, Joe Rogan at that time was just a little podcast. And Aubrey was telling this story where this little niche of a podcast, Joe Rogan, his followers were smaller than saying, like, I think he was highlighting, he paid a big celebrity to do an endorsement, barely made a blip on the marketing side or on the sales side, but then he marketed with Joe Rogan, and at that time he had a smaller fan base, but they were loyal, there were fanatics, and they bought his product. So, that was just, again, a lesson, a story that I was like, okay, we could do that. And so we've partnered with some influencers that are, they create good content, and then and it's good user generated content that we can then recycle and then use on our social media, because as a business owner, like, you have to I have to create new content. It could be a drain on you. And so when you have influencers or people that come in town and they create really good user generated content that you can post on your social media, it's a time saver, and it gets you out to more eyeballs.
Totally. I would also say too, on that note, is allow creators to be creators. Mm-hmm. Like a company that's also been great with me is Roan. They've sponsored me for a while, and they more or less have never forced me necessarily to create certain pieces of content. And my favorite example of this is, do you know who Casey Neistat is? Mm-hmm. He's a big YouTuber, if anybody's never heard of him. And he's been YouTubing for literally like the OG.
He's the godfather.
Yeah, the OG of YouTube. And he was talking about a brand that came to him, and they wanted to partner with him, and he created this piece of content for him, posted the video, and then the brand basically came at him and were like upset about the content that he created about their brand for whatever reason. And his response was essentially, "You've seen my content. You know what I create. If this wasn't in alignment with your brand, why did you come to me? Why did you pay me?" Right? And I think that's so true, is I think that oftentimes we go to these influencers and we're like, hey, create this piece of content based on this script and how we want to be represented in the market. And it's like, you're going to the wrong person. Like, let a creator be a creator.
Correct.
And if they're in alignment with you, awesome. If they're not, then don't work with them.
Right. But as a business owner on the other side, we set expectations. Like, please make sure you one reel, one post, whatever, how many in a week. And then if you can highlight these words, in that way, in terms of maybe search engine optimization or just what people are looking for, those interests, it helps make that organic content more purposeful.
Switching subjects here. I have a note here about Les Miserables.
Oh, Les Mis.
What am I reading here? So I always have intake forms for my for my guests. So you wrote something, and I was like, I need to make note of this. What are we talking about?
So Les Miserables. So it's a book by Victor Hugo. And the overarching concept is just about how someone can go from being a convict to reaching their full potential in life. And so that's the story of Jean in this book. So and then they've made musicals about it. They've made movies about it. I think Hugh Jackman played that character recently. And so it's a good book. It just reminds me like, hey, I can change my life. And I'm here on this planet to reach my full potential. And so it's a good dramatic book. It was one of the few books that I read that I actually kind of teared up at the end. And so, and it's a classic.
So that leads me to my next question of where do you see the future of Generator Lab going? Where do you envision things? What's going to make you cry at the end of the story?
We like to grow across the city, across the state, and across the country. And then I also want to use the business as a vehicle to purchase real estate. I have business mentors that have used their simple, boring business, and they use an SBA loan or they do seller finance through the owner, and they put their business in there and say let's just make an example. Say it's a dog training business, and he used the business to qualify for SBA loans, and he bought those 8 locations. He sells the business, but he still has the real estate. And so, those are things that I am figuring it out, because and that's what I'm working towards right now. So, I'm looking at properties here in Austin on the real estate side. We're having conversations with people like in Alabama and other states about putting a generator there. And and learning about different types of partnerships, and if it's right to franchise or should we license it, all these things I'm trying to figure out. And so, I think Generator is just one step towards another big project. For me at least, there's always that kind of real estate development side I've always wanted to scratch. And so it'd be cool if I can use the business. It'd be smart if I could use the business as a tool to do that.
Do you have an end goal? Like, do you have like a number you would hit and you're like, I'm good?
I do. I'll share this with you. And depending who I'm talking to, it could be a small number or a big number, but I have a vision board on my computer on my screensaver. So by 50, I want a net worth of 10 million.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And so again, the number is not really, I don't know. I think the number symbolizes the person I have to be in order to hit that number. And so that's what gets me excited. Who will Delfin be when he hits, that 10 million in net worth?
I appreciate you sharing that, because I was actually just recently having a conversation with somebody that they didn't have a number. And then unfortunately that leads you to a lot of misery, because like you just keep moving the goalposts and you just work harder and harder and you sacrifice more and more and more for what? Mm-hmm. Right. And I appreciate you sharing that you have that, because like honestly, most people don't. Most people just grow for the sake of growing, and they forget why they were doing it in the first place, which is obviously freedom and autonomy, which 10 million gives you that for sure.
Better. You got to think about profit margins as well. That's another story within the business. We were chasing a top line revenue goal, but not really focus on the bottom line. And so that's a new area of focus for me, at least with the company, is focusing on consistent high profit margins.
What are you guys' margins?
It depends. I will say that. So, and it depends, but relatively, I think in our industry, especially, I'm using like the boutique fitness space. So a lot of the information I get is like, say, from your F45s, your Orange Theories, your bar studios. Those are the business groups I belong to. A healthy profit margin there is anywhere from 20 to 40%. A lot of it's because of your labor cost. In our area, I'm in downtown Austin. I have expensive rent, so my profit margins can be high on some months and then low on some months. But I will say, when I have the right person in the right seat, it's better.
Am I safe to assume revenues over $1 million? You have to.
Yes.
You have to at this point.
Yeah. And so in the boutique fitness space, so again, it's all context. I might say $1 million, and that's small potatoes to some, and to a different business model, it might be a lot. So Take, like, say your average F45 or your Orange Theory or whatnot, if they can hit 100K a month, that's a healthy business. And they can get their margins up to 40%. But and that was one cool thing about this mastermind, is that we share our numbers. We bring our spreadsheets and share our numbers. And so that first time when you're opening up your robe and showing what you got, it's a little, it's nerve wracking. But I've seen studios that are doing like 50K a month and they're taking home 60%. So, it's really what you take home. And that's going to be my new focus, for 2025, is just other ways of increasing our margins and without increasing, say, labor cost.
Yeah, I'm surprised you say more labor than even because your location is prime. You have ideal location. That facility is sweet.
It's on the corner of Sexy and Sexy in downtown Austin. So,
it really is. So I would have thought that was digging more into those margins, but even 20 to 40% is good margins, honestly.
Yes, I know people that do $1 million a month, and they're she averages 15 to 20%.
Damn.
But that's a lot on $1 million.
Damn.
So. But whereas, again, the same analogy, people that do 50,000 a month and they're doing 60% margins.
I have a round of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I know you know these.
And you stretch.
First thing that comes to mind. What's your best business advice?
Surround yourself with other high performing people. And a quick story there is because in college, I was hanging around with 4 stoners. Guess who was the 5th stoner? Me. And so once I started hanging out with successful business owners, it helped.
Yeah, I write about that often. Your environment is the biggest impact on you, people and place. What's your best marketing advice?
I'm going to give 3 things. Marketing's too important to be left alone to the marketing department. So, you want to be involved because you want that marketing person to have like a startup mentality or a founder's mentality. And whereas, I've been on calls where they talk about their recommended ad spend or what their or their management costs would be, and I'm like, it's just absurd. So having that kind of mentality, you got to be involved with the marketing. 2 is have multiple lines in the water, everywhere from mailers to SEO to paid advertisement, all those things. You want to do that monthly and figure out what hits for you. And then what was my third thing? I have it decked out. Earlier today, I was asked about marketing advice. And third thing, and perhaps the most important thing, is a sales process. So what do you do with all those leads that you get? Do you have a process to reach out to them? Do you have a process to nurture them? So those are the 3 marketing advice tips that I recommend. Y'all take care.
Favorite part about entrepreneurship?
Who I'm becoming. It's who I'm becoming. So, and who I get to meet. When I was just an employee, I just felt like an employee. So I feel like I'm on a path to personal growth.
Feels good, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it's different. It's different than wiping balls. When are you the most productive?
When my kids are in school. I call it the mommy schedule, 8 to 3.
Who is your inspiration?
My wife.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about her many times, and it's always just you're in love, man.
Yeah.
Tell me one secret or something most people don't know about you.
Now this could be viewed as delegation or using AI, but I paid someone to help me co-write my college entrance exam into O2 school.
What?
Yeah. Because at that point, I could probably type 10 words a minute, and
Is that legal?
What do you think? No, but I basically told him like, hey, this is what I want to write for my entrance exam. And he wrote a draft, and then I fleshed it out basically. But
I can't believe it's not that different than what people are doing with AI now, though.
Yeah. I mean copywriting.
Yeah.
And delegating the task to someone that's more skilled than you.
It was a brilliant business move.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
What would you change about yourself?
I would have listened to my parents and stuck with piano lessons.
Why?
I think it'd be cool to, I still want to learn, but I want to learn to play piano. I like jazz piano. Like, it's the holidays. So every time I hear the Charlie Brown's theme and it has that kind of jazzy feel, I think that'd be a cool skill to have.
I like that.
Yeah.
Mine, I would like to learn the guitar. I know how to play, but I'd like to get better. Like I've had a goal. Well, I shouldn't say goal, because if it was a goal, I'd actually do it. But like I've wanted to learn to play the guitar well enough that I could get on stage and just like riff. I can't play that well.
What's the music genre you would kind of focus on?
Alternative, country,
Yeah.
something basic.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like an acoustic guitar.
Yeah. Singing as well, or just on the stage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not great at singing, but like
You get the guitar, we get the piano. Maybe we can get a gig in 20 years.
dude, yes, good number.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not ready right now.
Yes.
But what's your favorite app or resource right now?
Have you heard of ChatGPT?
A couple times. I know a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that a lot, from, writing copy to figuring out, spreadsheet formulas to HR questions. It's a good sounding board.
Did you see that they sort of officially announced AGI?
No, what is that?
Artificial General Intelligence. So the thing, I guess I don't know how much you know about AI.
A little bit, but is this a new company, a new product? Or?
No. OpenAI. So OpenAI created ChatGPT. So they have a new model that's considered to be essentially AGI. So I'll give you in the audience a short version of it. Everything that we've been playing with is what are called language models,
Right.
which basically just takes a whole bunch of interesting data, it gathers it, and then based on what you enter, it spits out what it knows based on the data you provided. AGI, artificial general intelligence, is basically it can come up with its own ideas. It doesn't require data. It can essentially think for itself. Technically speaking, they have accomplished that. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. It's kind of like, seems like they're keeping it hush hush at this moment, but they have a new version of ChatGPT. I think it's called 1.0 or I.O. or something like that. And it's apparently AGI, artificial general intelligence, like actual artificial intelligence.
It's moving fast.
Faster than we thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like everyone's projecting like years per se. It sounds like we're talking a lot less than that.
Right.
But even I'm shocked, to be honest. And I follow it pretty closely. But anyways, I digress. What keeps you motivated?
I guess that fear of not meeting my full potential.
Great answer. Favorite part about Austin, and you can't say the people.
I will say two things. I will say the Town Lake, or I'm dating myself, so Town Lake or Lady Bird Lake, the trail around it. And then the creative class here in Austin. So that kind of is the people, but it's the creatives. That's when I first moved here. It was just being, to have artists and musicians, restaurateurs, entrepreneurs, that creative class that makes the city livable is one thing I really love about Austin.
I like that. I want to acknowledge you.
I want to acknowledge you,
Delfin, for as an OT to an OT, bro-T as we're often called. I just like to say, like, I really respect and appreciate when I see other OTs really officially take that leap and like to do it big. Like you, like I said, I as a marketing agency and I work with a lot of health brands and health professionals. It's so rare, and nothing against OTs. I love my OTs, but I respect a lot for when OTs decide to like really live life on their terms and to take a risk and to take a chance. And you've done it, and you've been doing it now for 7 years? And you're still going. So yeah. I love it.
Well, I want to acknowledge you because I'm one of those weirdos that will listen to a podcast from the beginning. And I've been listening to you for a while, but to see where you've grown and to where you are now, you've grown and matured so much. And I just think that's awesome. So you definitely embody that kind of personal growth, personal development. So I look up to you. So thanks for being an inspiration.
I have a visual of my very first episode, and it's horrible. It's just so bad. Like if anyone wants to go to episode 1 where it's like me on the deck with holding a microphone, just jabbering about friggin' nothing. It's the worst episode of all time.
But you started. Yeah.
But appreciate you following.
Well, thank you.
What's your plug? Where can people find you?
So if you're in Austin, Texas, come to Generator Athlete Lab. We're downtown, online, generatorathletelab.com. Same thing with the IG handle, Generator Athlete Lab. If you want to connect with me, Delfin Ward on Instagram. And I'm working on maybe a side hustle, but it's called generategrowth.co. And so I might need your help with that eventually. But, that's going to be an outlet for helping people, probably people in the healthcare space that are wanting to make that transition to entrepreneurship, and whether they bought into a franchise or something else. But I'm helping some nurses right now. They bought into a franchise. And again, they have the healthcare background, the passion for helping people, but they don't necessarily have all the tools that their franchise promised them. And so that's the next thing. That's my little side hustle.
Keep me posted.
Okay.
If you're looking for collaboration or partnership, that very much intrigues me.
Yeah, it's all those tactical things.
Totally.
Yeah, and so you just time collapse, and here's what you need to do.
Totally. And it's two guys that come from healthcare and now on the business side, a lot to share.
Right.
So, cool. Last question. It's whatever your best piece of advice is. So if you were to go back to ground zero of Generator Lab, 2018, I believe you said, and you were give to advice to your younger self or anyone else in that circumstance of just starting their business, what would you tell them?
Fire faster, and then hire a coach. Hire someone to help you, because you don't have to suffer.